All right, we are live.
Hello, hello, hello.
Got some people logging on. That's exciting.
Yep, it is.
So, good evening, everyone in the pre-med world. I am Rachel Grubbs. I'm one of the co-founders of MAPT. And tonight's presentation is presented by MAPT. And who you're mostly going to hear from for the evening is this fellow right here, Dr. Scott Wright.
Hello, hello, hello.
And in case you guys don't know, Dr. Wright is extremely experienced in the world of medical education. So he's been in medical education for 25 years. Currently, he serves as the vice president of MAPT and is our senior advisor. But in other roles, he's been the director of admissions at UT Southwestern Med School. He's been the Associate Dean and Director of Health Professions Programs at UT Dallas, so helping undergrads. And he's been the Executive Director of TMDSAS. So if you think about what I just said, Dr. Wright is someone who has advised pre-meds on the way to med school, has been on medical school adcoms looking at applicants, and has run one of the entire services that looks at applicants from both sides and sort of thinks about the integration of what aspiring doctors want and what med schools want from their aspiring doctors. So obviously, highly qualified gentleman here. And more importantly, and this is part of why I wanted to do his introduction tonight, I wanted to let you guys know that I just think Scott is an incredibly nice person and incredibly good at shooting straight truth in a way that is digestible and something you can take in. Scott does not mince words. He definitely tells you what you need to know, but he does a lot of one-on-one advising for us. And almost without fail, every time someone new meets with him, I get an email a day or two later that says, I feel so much better now. So, this is someone who's seen thousands of students, who's going to be super honest with us all tonight, but is also hopefully going to leave you with some hope. So I think that's a wonderful conversation. And I'm particularly excited about tonight's session because this is something so different from what most pre-med sessions are, where we're going to really look at applicants in a different way. And Scott, I'll let you take over from here.
Great.
I'm going to be back towards the end when you guys have questions. I'll be moderating the chat, but I'll let Scott tell you a little bit more about how tonight's a little different from most sessions.
Yeah, great. Thanks, Rachel. Well, welcome, everybody. It's super nice to be here tonight, and hopefully you're enjoying your evening. I'm certainly enjoying mine. I'm here in Austin, Texas, and it's a beautiful evening. It's partly cloudy, and but a really nice, about 75 degrees, and so really enjoying a nice early fall evening, and looking forward to spending some time with you guys tonight to really talk about something that doesn't get talked about very much, but is super important when it comes to what admissions committees really want out of applicants. So we're going to talk about that, and as I go through the information that we're going to kind of go through tonight, I want you to think about, how does this apply to you? How does what we're going to talk about, how does it apply to you? How do you as an individual exemplify the qualities that we're going to talk about tonight? And how will you communicate those to an admissions committee in your application, in the interview process? How will you communicate those once you're in medical school to the faculty and your peers? And how will you communicate those ultimately to the patients that you will see both in medical school, in residency, and then ultimately when you're out on your own practicing medicine? Hopefully these qualities that we're going to talk about tonight and over the next 5 or 6 weeks will really impact you and start you to be thinking. I would encourage you to do a little journaling even about these things, and maybe take some notes tonight, and think about it and write down what these things mean to you, and how they are impacting you, and how you exemplify these qualities. So let's jump right into it. We all know that medical schools want certain things out of their applicants. The things that they want to see, that we typically talk about, that get talked about a lot, are the academics, the numbers types of things. Experience in healthcare, for example. We can put a number on that. We can say, okay, I've done volunteering for X many hours, or I've done clinical hours this much, or I've shadowed a physician or multiple physicians for this many days, this many hours. We talk about the grade point average. We talk about how that exemplifies your ability to stick it out in the classroom, and we talk about how that's important. Even upward trends are important in terms of how that gets worked out. So you're not, but again, this is a number that we can put on this. It doesn't mean it's a bad thing. It doesn't mean it's that it's overlooked, but it also doesn't mean that it's the only thing in the application process that's important. And then we talk about, obviously, the skills that are exemplified when you take the MCAT. These are your ability to transfer knowledge from the classroom into a high-stakes testing situation and be able to transfer knowledge into a question that illustrates that you understood it and that you can critically analyze a situation using the knowledge that you had and then answer the appropriate question with a solution. So we know these parts that medical schools really want. And we talk about these a lot, and your advisors at school talk about these. Your peers talk about these. They get talked about on Student Doctor Network. They get talked about in Reddit endlessly. But that's not what I'm going to talk about tonight. What I'm going to talk about tonight are personal things that are really important in a clinical setting to this relational adventure that we're on in medicine, which is all about connecting between you and someone else, whether that someone else is a team member, whether that someone else is another physician, or whether that someone else is the patient or the patient's family member. This is all about connection. This is about who I am as an individual and how I connect with you as an individual. Now, it's sort of ironic that we're doing this virtually. So our connection is an electronic one today, and that's the world we live in right now. But ultimately, those connections happen even in a virtual setting. I have an appointment tomorrow with one of my physicians. Actually, I'm meeting with the physician's nurse practitioner tomorrow morning, and we're doing it virtually. And so that's the world we live in right now. But that's a connection. I feel a connection to the nurse practitioner. I feel a connection to my physician, whether it's virtually or in person. So I want to talk about tonight the skills, the qualities that are vital to understanding what this relational aspect of medicine is all about. So what do medical schools want to see other than just the numbers parts? And that's what we'll look at now. So there are these personal qualities that really are important in these clinical settings. And the Association of American Medical Colleges developed a number of what they call the core competencies relative to pre-med students and those coming into medical school. They're separated into 3 categories. Pre-professional competencies. These are the soft skills that we're going to be really talking about tonight and over the next few weeks. The thinking and reasoning competencies. These are those that really get expressed in the numbers parts, the GPA, the MCAT score, as well as just the ability to inquire in a scientific sort of way, be able to write about things. And then there's the science competencies themselves, the competencies of living systems as well as of human behavior. How do these show up? How do these competencies show up in the materials that you supply when you're trying to get into medical school? Well, they show up obviously in your participation in activities, and we're going to talk a little bit about that as we go along. They show up in what you do. We used to say a lot that there's a big difference between saying you're going to do something and actually doing it. A lot of students say, oh, I want to do X, Y, and Z. They'll say that in their application. So, for example, we used to talk about, a lot of students say these days, I want to serve underserved populations of people. I want to serve underserved populations. But we look in their application materials, and there's no evidence that they've ever served an underserved population, or they've ever been to an underserved area. So it's not indicative. The best predictor of future behavior is past behavior. So in your activities, we want to see these things played out in a tangible kind of way. We also will see these often in a letter of recommendation, or what is often called a letter of evaluation, where your recommender may say, for example, oh, this student is really great working with other people, or this student is great as a team member and works well with the members of the team around him or her. These qualities, these personal competencies will also show up when you're in an interview setting. And that's whether you're in a virtual interview setting or a real interview setting, a person-to-person interview setting. They will show up in those things: your ability to communicate, your ability to connect with me as an individual, that relational quality that I talked about earlier, which is so really so crucial. And then ultimately, it's going to show up in the way you describe your extracurricular activities, the essays that you write, the personal statement, the descriptions. How deep are those? How deeply do they examine your activities, what you did, what you're all about, and how do they indicate that? How do those descriptions, how do those essays indicate that you really have connected with these competencies? What we are not talking about tonight is checking a box. Now, you can check a box when you've completed a prerequisite. You can check a box when you have done an activity. Well, I shadowed somebody for 24 hours, or I've had 1,400 hours of clinical experience. You can check those boxes. You can check a box and say, I made an A in organic chemistry. You can check a box and say, I made the MCAT score that shows that I'm a smart person and I can do this. We're not talking about checking boxes tonight. We're talking about individual sort of qualities that indicate some things about you and about how you're going to connect with others. So that's what we're going to talk about tonight, these competencies. And I have developed these into, first let me show you what these competencies are, because we're really going to focus on the pre-professional competencies of the AAMC core. Those are here indicated. So these are the 9 personal or pre-professional, as they call them, competencies that the AAMC talks about. Service orientation, we'll talk about that. So social skills, cultural competence, teamwork, oral communication, an ethical responsibility to yourself and to others around you, being reliable and dependable, being resilient and adaptable, and then ultimately being capable of improving yourself or growth. And these can be these competencies, these qualities of personal qualities can be really worked out in multiple times in one experience. So, in other words, you may do something as a part of your life that really touch on many of these things as you go along. So, what I've done, there's 9 of these is a lot to sort of handle. And I have developed them into 6 that I think we want to talk about over the next few weeks. And those 6 are really, I think you'll connect with them in a way And they will correlate with these pre-professional competencies that the AAMC has developed. So the six that we're going to really talk about over the next few weeks are these. The first one is altruism. These are the 6 personal traits that medical schools want to see in applicants. These are what medical schools want to see in you. Yes, they want to see a good GPA. Yes, they want to see a strong MCAT score. Yes, they want to see that you've done activities that are all indicative of your motivation and commitment to medicine. But they also want to see these personal traits in you that are super important in a clinical setting. So what I want to go through, we're going to go through these. Tonight, we're going to focus on altruism. In the future weeks, we're going to talk about humility, self-awareness, autonomy, accountability, and a growth orientation. These are the 6 personal traits that I think medical schools really want to see. And then we're going to talk about how each one of these correlates with multiple of those 9 core competencies that the AAMC has developed. So tonight is all about altruism. Now, I think what we want to understand first is what is altruism all about. We often use this word altruism, but sometimes we don't necessarily understand really what it means or what the impact of it is. So we're going to look at this quality, this personal trait tonight, and then we'll move forward over the course of the next 5 weeks to talk about the others. So altruism. Let's define what altruism is and what it means and how it works out experientially. So altruism is fundamentally from the Latin term alt, which basically means other. It's where we get other words such as an alternate or the alternate or an alternative option that you might have. It means specifically to take the place of someone else. An alternate, for example, takes the place of someone else. If a medical school offers places of admission to 50 students, and one of those students, for some reason, cannot attend, they will look for an alternate to fill the place or to take the place of the one that has left, to take the place of the other. So we'll define altruism as the principle or practice of concern for the welfare of others as opposed to your own needs or desires. We don't want to talk about ourselves here. This is the opposite of egotism. This is the opposite of me-centeredness. This is all about the other, the principle or practice of concern for the welfare of others as opposed to your own needs or desires. Now, we can all connect with that. And hopefully you can connect with that as someone who wants to go into healthcare and wants to go into medicine, that, yeah, we can all see this is important. This is not a minor issue here. So we want to focus on the other person. Now, what I will say is that in American society today, this is countercultural. In many ways, American society today is very individualistic, is very me-focused. What am I going to get out of this? What am I going to, how am I going to benefit from this activity or from this particular enterprise? Am I going to get lauded as a great person? Am I going to get money out of it? Am I going to get a better reputation because of it? Whatever. This is where selfishness plays in as opposed to selflessness. So we're defining then this as a focus on the needs or desires of others. Now, there are a variety of attributes related to this. As I said, this is not being self-absorbed or self-centered. This is being considerate and compassionate for those around you. It is essentially about being others-oriented. I often say that we all know people who are what I call conversational narcissists. In other words, conversations with that person constantly are about themselves. I have a friend who I've known for a number of years, and this friend is a conversational narcissist. It doesn't matter what you're talking about. She knows something about that, or that's happened to her, or it spawns a story that she has to tell about some one time when her friend did this or that. Everything ends up being about her. And I bet of the number of people that are on this workshop tonight, we all know people like that everything is about them. Their conversations revolve around themselves. That's not altruism. Yeah. One of you said, I know more than a few of those, and I do too. And and so what we want to really focus in on is the other person, is being oriented to others, and that we're considerate. And as I said, this is something that is not common in American society today. It's very we live in a society where everything focuses on me. I often think about the Burger King commercials, which are sort of illustrate that. And if you recall, the Burger King commercials are about have it your way. Have it your way. Don't have it the way that the restaurant's going to make it, like some other fast food places, but you want to have it your way. Well, this is American society today. It is about me. It's about me. I want it my way. I want it now. I want it when I want it. I want it my way. But as healthcare professionals, as a physician, that's not what we're all about. What physicians are all about is serving the other, serving the patient, serving the patient's family, and being about serving others in the healthcare environment as well. And I think what you're going to see throughout the weeks as we go over these personal traits, especially tonight talking about altruism, is that these are traits that are great for any human being and not just physicians. If we could instill these traits in ourselves as human beings, we would have a much better world to live in. If all of us pursued a lifestyle that focused on the needs of others and focused on being considerate and compassionate with the needs of others, wouldn't it be great? Wouldn't it be great driving down the freeway in a world like that, where when you're trying to merge on the freeway and somebody lets you in because they're considerate and kind and they are thinking about the needs of others and not just their own 3 seconds that it's going to take them to let you in. Wouldn't that be great? So these are all about, healthcare, yes, and being good, strong physicians, but these are also about being good, wonderful people. What a wonderful world that would be. I'm not going to start singing that song, by the way. You can, I won't do that to you. This is a major competency for physicians. The focus on the needs of the others. Now, how does this correlate to what we talked about, those AAMC competencies? Here's the competency from the AAMC of the service orientation. Now, look at this. Demonstrates a desire to help others and a sensitivity to others' needs and feelings. Demonstrates a desire to alleviate others' distress. Recognizes and acts on his or her responsibilities to society. And what we can say is society is the collective other. It's not always about just the individual other. Sometimes it's also about the collective other. You can see how this service orientation competency indicated by the AAMC is exactly altruism. It is about being about helping other people. And you guys often say, oh, I don't want to say that in my application. It sounds so cliche. It sounds so cliche to say, I want to help other people. Isn't that what you want to do? I hope that's what you want to do. I hope that's what you want to be all about. But you have to be willing to say that. And it's not, maybe it is cliche, but say it anyway. If that's what you feel, which is I hope it is, then say it anyway. Even if it sounds cliche, it is not bad to be cliche. I know you guys want to all be super individuals and different than everybody else. And the way that you differentiate yourself from other people is through the ways that you participate, the activities that you actually participate in, et cetera, and how you show being others centered, and how you show how you want to help people. The other AAMC competency that this really addresses is the competency of social skills. You can see in the same way, demonstrate an awareness of others' needs. You demonstrate through social skills an awareness of other people's needs and their goals and their feelings and the ways that social and behavioral clues affect people's interactions and behaviors. So we recognize that the patient and the patient's families have needs. The patient and the patient's families have goals and feelings. And we're going to demonstrate that we're aware of those feelings, that we are centered on those feelings of the other. And I am going to adjust my behavior in a response to these social cues that I see from the patient. You know, I remember one time my oldest daughter was always in soccer. She played soccer forever, and she always got hurt too. She was the goalkeeper, and so she was constantly getting hurt. She would break bones, and she would dislocate that or this or that, or scrapes or bumps, or it was always something. And so one time I think she had dislocated something or broken a leg or whatever, and so we had gone to see the orthopedic surgeon to find out what we needed to do to get it fixed. And we walked into this orthopedic surgeon's examination room, and eventually he came into the room, and not once. So we were in that room with him probably for about 10 minutes, maybe a little bit longer, not much longer. I would say around 10 minutes that we were in that room. And not once in the entire time that we were in that room did that doctor look in the eyes of either one of us. Never. He looked at the ceiling. He looked at the floor. He looked at the x-rays. He looked out the window. He looked at his notes. He never once acknowledged the other in the room. It was very strange, and it did not feel like we were being treated with respect. It did not feel like our feelings and our needs and goals were being addressed, that he was even aware that we were human beings. It was a very crazy situation. And so what we're talking about here is altruism is about, yes, it's about social skills. It is about awareness of the needs and the responsibility of being aware of others' goals and feelings. Finally, the other core competency that of the AAMC that this really addresses the issue of altruism is ethical responsibility. We're going to talk a lot about ethical responsibility over the course of these weeks, and in the future here at MAPT, we're gonna do more of these workshops in the future, and we're going to talk a lot about ethics and ethical responsibility. And ethics is all about behaving in a way that is appropriate, and that it cultivates in the other a sense of belongingness, of relational belongingness with me. I want to see that my physician adheres to certain principles, that it adheres to certain rules that have me in mind as an individual, as the other. And we'll talk more about ethical responsibilities. It's really it's a big topic, but this is another part of the AAMC core competencies that that altruism really addresses. Because in order to be ethical, you have to recognize that it's not all about you. Again, we'll go back to that. It's not all about you. It's not about being selfish. It's about being selfless. And selflessness has with it as a connection integrity and ethical responsibility. Now, so I hope you see how altruism, this concentration on others, really is a focus of what medical schools are really wanting to see. Now, this comes up in the medical school application, and can come up in a lot of different ways. Participation, obviously, in extracurricular activities. Hopefully, you're being about doing things that are all about other people. Maybe you're in a club that helps to serve people on your campus, or maybe you are working at a food bank in your local community. Maybe you're volunteering to take Meals on Wheels to individuals that can't get out, particularly now in the pandemic that we find ourselves in. But these extracurricular activities outside the classroom, and this shows up not as paid employment, and I'm not saying that you can't show altruism within the context of paid employment, but in paid employment, you're getting something tangible out of it. I'm talking about spending your time and effort involved in something that you don't necessarily benefit much from, that you're not getting paid for it, you're not getting something out of it except for the benefit of maybe a good feeling that you get when you serve someone else. And in our local communities, in your local community, wherever you are, there is not one place in this nation that doesn't have opportunities for you to do this very kind of thing, to serve others. Whether you are in a large urban area or a small rural area, whether you're in a suburb or a small town, you can find opportunities to serve individuals. Maybe it's, as I said, at a local homeless shelter, where you are providing socks to the homeless. Maybe it's going and reading to kindergartners who are trying to learn how to read. Maybe it's going to a local community center where you speak English to recent immigrants who are trying to learn the language, and you're just having a conversation with them about their lives and helping them to learn English. The message here is that there are people around you right now who need you and who need the skills that you have. There are people who need those skills. If we go back one more slide, the other direction. There you go. There are people who need you, and there are people who need your skills, and your skills of being able to speak English, your skills of being able to read, your skills of being able to walk and talk, and whatever you can do. You don't have to have the skills of a surgeon at this point to be able to serve others. You can serve others in many different ways. These also show up in your activity descriptions, how you describe what you're talking about, what you did. Maybe you were handing out socks at a homeless shelter, and how altruism shows up is not only in the participation that you had in that activity, but also in how you describe it, what you got out of that, what meaning you got from that. It's what I like to call the so what part. It's not just the what, you did something, you participated in an activity, but it's the so what. So what? What difference does it make? What did it have any meaning to you at all? It'll also show up in your personal statement and in other essays. And as I said earlier, in letters, often, we would often see volunteer coordinators at various types of community volunteer efforts. And a volunteer coordinator would write a letter of recommendation for a student, and they would be effusive in that letter about how wonderful that particular student was and how selfless they were. They showed up on time. They always were dependable and coming when they were supposed to. And while they were there, they were always focused on the needs of the others. The interview will also show these as you go through the process. Now, for each one of the personal traits that we're going to go through over the course of the next few weeks, I've chosen a piece of art, piece of artwork that illustrates it. And so we have one tonight. This piece of art. This is this particular painting is called Belisarius Begging for Alms. This is by Jean-Louis David, and it was painted in 1781. And this particular painting is very interesting. Now, there's some obvious things about this. We have someone who is in need, who is begging for alms, begging for money. And we have a woman who has stopped on her way to give alms or to give money to this beggar. This is a particular painting. It's from the neoclassical period, and I really like it a lot. I think it illustrates this well. One of the interesting things about this painting, however, is to note that the soldier in the background is raising his hands. The soldier in the background is raising his hands because he has just recognized that the beggar is Belisarius, who was a former military general who was blinded by the Roman emperor and left to beg for the rest of his life. So this was someone who had had it all, a military professional who had gotten crosswise with the leader, had been blinded and left to fend for himself on the streets. And we have this woman then helping him by giving him money. What does that say to me? That says to me that there are some needs that are big and small. Some are big, some are small. It also says to me that we may need help someday. I'm sure Belisarius didn't think when he was a military general that he would be in need of begging for alms eventually. I think it serves to tell us that we may become the other that is in need of assistance. We've all been there at some point. We've all been there where we needed something and we needed someone to step in to help. I had a situation earlier this week where on Sunday I'd gone to brunch with a friend, and in the process of eating brunch with this friend, within about 2 or 3 hours, I had gotten food poisoning, and I was sick for about 36 hours. I was not at all feeling very well. And it was wonderful to have individuals in my life who treated me considerately and compassionately as the other. We will all end up as the other at some point. And we all want to have people there who will serve us. So we need to keep in mind that is what we're doing as individuals when we seek to be altruistic, is that we seek to be all about the other. We seek to be selfless. We seek to be focused on the needs of the other, whether that's someone in the community as we go through our daily lives, or whether that is someone as a patient that we're serving as a part of our duties in the world of medicine. Either way, we should be focused on those needs of the other. So I want you to take some of those, some of what we've said. If you don't take anything away from tonight, take away the word other, otherness. It is about the other. It is about the other person. It's about the other group. It's about the needs and the desires and the goals and the feelings of the others. That's what medical schools want to see in their applicants. They want to see applicants who are focused on serving other individuals. They want to see absolutely people who are focused on what it means to be about serving their patients and the families of their patients. So think about that. As I said earlier, journal about it a little bit. Tonight, after we finish this, write down a few thoughts that you have. How do you illustrate this in your life right now? How are you doing that right now as an individual? Are you participating in activities? Are you doing that as a part of a group? Are you doing that on an individual basis? Do you do it in your daily life with your own family members? Do you do it in daily life with the peers that are around you, in school or at your workplace? Do you do it in daily life? This is an ouchie for me. On the road. Do I do that on the road when I'm driving down the freeway? That's a tough one for me. I become a real monster when I get in the car, unfortunately, and it's a real character flaw for me, and I need to work on that. Do we do it in our daily lives? Are we about it? Are we about being others oriented? So think about that. Think about that as we go along. So next week we're gonna talk about the next one, humility. We'll talk about how it gets worked out in the application process and what that actually means, and we'll talk in depth about the issue of humility. Now I want to as an end point before we go to some questions and answers, I want to remind you that part of what the MAPT software does is to help you sort of figure that out and track these sort of things. You can get involved with MAPT as you want to. It'll take care of the numbers parts, the GPA and tracking these activities, but it will in fact help you to reflect on these core competencies and to research what schools you want to be involved with and what you're interested in. And we'll do some live weekly events. We do a Q&A every Monday night called Ask the Dean, where I respond. Dr. Gray and I both respond to questions and stuff, and so we'll do that. So I think now, Rachel, I think maybe we can have some questions and answers, and if there's any out there, if anybody has anything that they'd like to ask about altruism and how that gets worked out.
Yeah, one of my favorite things about presenting to the pre-med community in general is how engaged of an audience they are. Lots of comments, lots of questions as we've been going. Many of you relate strongly to the road rage thing.
Now, I did not use the word road rage. Let me just.
Oh no,
I've never been involved in road rage. It's all inside of me, and it's all me like. Oh, but yeah, I'm not quite that bad.
Right. No, I didn't. Sorry. Didn't mean to accuse you of
No
that.
no worries.
Maybe
no
I
worries.
was projecting. But so yeah, we're gonna oops, let's make sure we have some faces for us. We're gonna do some questions for you guys now. So I've seen a lot already in here, so I'm gonna try to cherry pick some. I'm sure we won't get to all. One thing I want to start with, because everybody always asks, is yes, this is going to be out for replay. So if you missed part of it or you want to go back, because these are live streams, they'll post the moment they're over. So you'll be able to reread these slides. And, a lot of the theme, as you were starting to talk about the importance of showing altruism, a lot of the questions started coming up about, should I get a minor in medical ethics? Should I get a major in psychology? So still sort of thinking about the academic side of it. So let's start
Right.
there. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think that that's plausible. I actually love the humanities. My major in college was in the humanities, and I really I like what the humanities does for a student. So I think philosophy, psychology, sociology, and social sciences equally beneficial. The humanities, however, philosophy, literature can mean a lot in that regard. History. I was a history major, and so I loved seeing the part of what humanness was in terms of the historical record and how that played out. So I think a humanities major such as medical ethics or philosophy, depending on how large your institution is, they may not have a specific major or even minor in something as specific as medical ethics, but they might have a philosophy or a religion major where some of that stuff could get played out and could benefit a student. So absolutely, I think that can be really really beneficial and kind of open up different worlds to particularly to someone who's a science major.
Okay, great. And then, yeah, one of the big questions, I mean, this comes up every week in some form from some audience is, how do I get that volunteer experience in the COVID age?
Yeah.
I've put up one question, but we had 10 or 20 different versions of this.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, this is a challenge, and I will readily admit that it is a challenge. My hope is that you haven't waited until now to show your altruistic impulses, that you've been about this over the course of your life, but especially in your college experience, that you've been about serving other people in a variety of different ways. Now, at the present, it's a little bit challenging, but there are still homeless out there. There are homeless people who need food. There are homeless people who need socks, and there are homeless people who need someone to talk to them. There are nursing homes where residents need conversation, and maybe that conversation happens through a window. Maybe these conversations happen virtually with an elderly person at a nursing home near you. So I think you have to explore deeper opportunities around you and see what's available. And if all you're trying to do is check a box, well, if I'm not going to do it if I can't get credit for it, if I can't put it on the application as I volunteered at this homeless shelter or I did that, and I recognize the need for that, and I'm not saying that's a bad thing, but I'm saying you got to think outside the box, particularly in the age of COVID, where we're all limited in terms of what we can do. You have to think outside the box and think about, what am I doing right now to serve other people, and do those things as much as you can, and be about that as a lifestyle.
Yep. Yeah, and there have been some great comments, people chiming in. Toys for Tots needs help right now.
Yep.
I know.
And I mentioned Meals on Wheels is another great example of that.
And food banks in general. I mean, I don't know how much you guys, there's so much in the news. We don't all catch every piece of news. But one of the things I've been watching closely is that food banks are expecting a huge shortage this fall and winter because prices have gone up so much and so many people are unemployed. So, right now it is a little bit harder to volunteer in hospitals because of the safety issues. But food banks definitely need help.
Yeah, absolutely.
And then again, I'm trying to synthesize here, but a lot of people are asking essentially, what about paid volunteering? So what if the work I do is altruistic? So I'm a teacher's assistant or I work in a hospital. What are your thoughts on that?
So let me just point out that paid and volunteering are mutually exclusive. If it's volunteering, you're not getting paid. If you're getting paid, it's not volunteering. So let's just be clear on what we're talking about here. If you're talking about paid, if you get paid for it, that doesn't mean it's a bad thing. It doesn't mean you're not being altruistic in that environment, but you're getting something out of it. You're getting paid for it. You can have an altruistic impulse. You can be others oriented within the context of paid employment. But I think that is different than getting nothing out of it necessarily and doing it simply to serve the other individuals.
Yep. Okay, so here's an interesting question. What if we are about serving others as a lifestyle and we apply it in everyday life amongst little things, but have not been able to do something large enough to mention in an application?
Well, that's a good question. I think you have to search out those large enough, what you termed large enough things to do that would be capable of being mentioned in an application. You have to do that. So a good example would be you're walking down the street. I live in Austin, Texas. We have it's a large city, and I am downtown quite a bit and used to work in the downtown area. And we have large, as do most large cities, a substantial homeless population, and they're out on the streets and asking for money. And so, if I give them money, that's an altruistic impulse. That's an altruistic activity. I gave money to a homeless person, or maybe if you don't want to give money, often I would go and I would buy them a cup of coffee. I would say, I'm sorry, I won't give you money, but I'll go get you something to eat. I'll get you a cup of coffee or a donut, or I'll buy you lunch, or whatever. And so whatever, that's an altruistic activity. But that's not something you're going to say in your application. Oh, I give money to the homeless as I walk down the street. But you can find ways of doing that with homeless population, for example, in larger ways, where it is where you're doing it in a broader sense that gives you the opportunity to illustrate that in your application. And what I don't want to do, and please excuse me, I don't want to talk as if or make it out that doing things for the benefit of your application is necessarily all bad. I recognize that there are gradients of these things, and in the world of philosophy, there's a lot of discussion about, does altruism actually really exist? In other words, does selflessness actually exist? And because we get something out of everything that we do, even if it's an activity that is about the other. So maybe I get, for example, maybe what I get out of it is a great feeling. I feel good about myself. I help these other people. I feel good about what I did. And so I'm getting something out of it. Therefore, it is not purely a selfless activity. So that's sort of the mumbo jumbo of philosophy and stuff. But so what I don't want to say is that you can't get things out of it, and that you can't be concerned about illustrating these things in your application. And you can definitely do that, but you do have to search out those things that are going to be, as the questioner said, big enough to put them in your application.
Yeah, and I'll go back to something you said at the beginning, but bears repeating. This is not a checkbox situation.
Right.
Which is really the whole reason that Dr. Wright decided that our first workshop should focus on this, because there is a little bit of checkboxing in pre-med life. And I don't mean that as a judgment on this group. There's a long list of stuff that needs to get done.
Yeah.
And anytime you have a long list over many years, you want to feel like you're making progress. You want to be able to strike a line through it or say, okay, I've accomplished that. And so many of them go on, right? Like GPA never really stops.
Right.
So for the things that are concrete and finite, like MCAT, I mean, MCAT is a beast, but once you're done, you're done. So we definitely understand that temptation, but what we're hoping to help you reflect on both tonight and for the next 6 weeks is the fact that this is something that you should be working to develop in yourselves if after this conversation you realize maybe that's something that needs development. So there aren't right or wrong answers. It's not black or white. We just want to help you think a little bit more about that in yourselves.
Yeah.
And that will also help you in the pre-med application process.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So that's probably a good place for us to leave it for tonight.
Yeah, thank you, everyone. This has been a wonderful time, and I hope that you will come next week and over the next few weeks as we go through these various personal traits and what med schools are really wanting to see out of applicants. So this has been fantastic. Thank you too, Rachel, for all that you do.
Yeah, it's always so fun to work with you. So Thursdays at 8 p.m. We'll be back next week, Thursday, October 15th, 8 p.m. Eastern, 5 p.m. Pacific. So like we said, there's more traits. So we'll see you again and do another deep dive into a trait next week, guys.
Okay, thanks, guys. Y'all have a good night.
Good night.
Bye.